I'm Jacqueline. Today I'm going to give you some tips and suggestions for turning narrow tubes such as legs for dolls and stuffed animals. Here's a leg that I've sewn together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So here's our leg that I've sewn together with the right sides of the fabric together. Now I've used green thread here so that you can see the seam, but normally we would use a matching thread, in this case white thread. I've used a small stitch length for a couple of different reasons. One is that it's going to make your curve a lot smoother when you sew around those curves, and the other is we're going to trim this seam allowance and we want the stitches to be nice and secure, so the small stitches will help with that. Now when you are stitching something like this, remember to always backstitch at the beginning and the ending of your seam where that opening is. If you don't backstitch, when you go to turn it, those seams are just going to come apart and it's going to be really hard to work with. So here's my little leg. I've trimmed the seam allowance and now it's time to turn it right side out. Here's the opening. I'm just going to start turning the tube this way. And what you can do, because this tube is so narrow, is take a pair of tweezers and just gently work that out. Just gently keep pulling the inside of the tube towards the outside. And you want to be very gentle with the tweezers. Don't pull too hard. You don't want to pull out your seam or pull any of the fibers of your fabric and make a run in your fabric. So just be patient and slowly pull that out and keep going till you get to the end, and then it will look like that. So another thing you can do if you're going to be turning a lot of these little skinny tubes is you can invest in something called a fast turn. They're available on the internet. You can tell I've had mine for many years, but it's really useful. And what you do is you just choose the proper size tube. They come with several different sizes. And you put that in there all the way to the end, and then you take the needle and you just thread it through, and that sharp piece of wire is actually going to poke through the fabric, but it's got that little curve on it which will hold it in place. And then you just really gently start to pull back on that needle, and at the same time you kind of fish the end of the tube through your fast turn tube. And then you just have to turn the wire to get the needle out, and that goes really quickly. Okay, so now our tube has been turned, and we just want to flatten all those seams out, push them out. So this is just a wooden bamboo skewer that you get in the kitchen department for making like shish kebabs and that kind of thing. I'm going to use the blunt end. I don't want to use the sharp end because I don't want it to poke through my fabric. So I just take the blunt end and I just start using that to kind of push those seams out. Just kind of push and scrape along the inside of the seam, and it will push out that seam allowance and make it flatter. And then what you can do is get your iron, and I'm going to start pressing. I'm going to do it really slowly and just make sure that that seam is pressed all the way out. And then I can stop in between and just keep using that wooden skewer to make sure that all my seams are pushed out. Kind of finger press it and then use the iron. And just keep working all the way around, and then you will end up with this. Okay, so now my leg is all pressed and ready to be stuffed. When you're stuffing something really narrow like that, the important thing to remember is to use little tiny pieces of fiber fill. This is polyester filling. Don't try to jam giant pieces of stuffing in there just to get it done quickly. You're going to end up with a lot of big lumps and bumps in there. There's my wooden skewer again using the blunt end. And I'm going to take my little pieces of fiber fill and start pushing them to the end. And what you want to do is get your little pieces and push them all the way to the end and get the end of that leg well stuffed before you go on. Okay, so here you can see how that toe is nicely stuffed. You don't want it overstuffed, but you want it to be nice and full. So then you just keep taking those little pieces and stuffing the leg until you get this. So those are my tips for turning narrow tubes and making legs for stuffed animals and dolls. I hope this has been helpful.